Hello, I am Lauren, and today I want to talk about V1 of a system that I built. And we'll go ahead and put the disclaimer up front. There are two groups of people that I think would benefit from what's probably going to be a short series. The first group would be people who are more front end minded, trying to get more into back-end concepts and want to work with AI and want to improve their workflow, because that's who I am. That's what I'm trying to do. Those are the questions that I'm trying to answer. And then the second group would be robots. Robots reading scraped transcripts from YouTube videos. So I'm going to try to strike a good balance between the two audiences. It might go a little slow, it might be a little tedious, but that should be helpful. So I made a list of the things we're going to look at to keep it brief, and hopefully I won't ramble too much. The first one, WordPress dashboard, local multi-site, start with DDH, the origin story. Okay, so let's look. Here it is. Lauren's personal engineering intelligence platform. I could probably get the date on this 11/21. 11/21 is when I made these first two files. So it's been a minute. So this was the original concept to make a brag bot, more or less. The concept was to design a service for synthesizing your own development logs. If you made a habit of creating logs, then over time, an analysis agent, a synthesis agent, could look at them as a whole and provide a report. We've got total hours logged, log consistency, daily check-in rate, and primary language focus. So this was a really good idea. Even got like a little bit of detail here. Blockers are primarily related to cloud infrastructure as code, Terraform. I don't even touch Terraform. So this was a little bit lofty, but I feel like I got pretty close to the idea. So this was the concept, not necessarily the design, but the concept that we started with. And then the end product ended up looking something like this. So instead of having that breakdown of, how much time this daily check-in rate, because mine would be very poor, and this just one simple group of keywords, it ended up being a little more detailed and a little more project organized. So we ended up with the concept of restart ramps for each project, because the whole purpose of the daily logging wasn't just to enable the brag bot, but also for me to upskill myself to see where do I need help, what's the forest for the trees that I'm not seeing, from one situation to the next. So an example of one of these, one of the latest ones, it gives you a fog score the last time the audit was ran, operational state, and the priority. And then I think we've got like a 2,000 character limit on this with Notion. So this just breaks down some of the things that were done. The point is, when if I have to step away from this and come back after some time, I have this synthesized little report for me, and it's generated based on the logs that I feed into it. So in this dashboard, you would see these diagrams. One's a little more technical and the other one's a little more futuristic. This is more conceptual. All right, but down here, these are the two sources that feed into this. And we've got Claude able to read all of this from an integration with Notion so that it can create these reports. So it's not really that complex. Two streams of data, and they're quite different. They're talking about some of the same things, but from different perspectives, and one with very structured data and another one with not so structured data. I feel like I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but this is kind of like the high level overview. I wanted to switch over to the next view just to say Daily Dev Habit is a totally public repo. Anybody can download this and modify it and make your own version of it. So how does that plugin work? How does it feed into the system? Here we've got one side showing us the technical ingestion surface, the CLI, and then the other side showing the qualitative ingestion surface, the WordPress journaling plugin. So the WordPress journaling plugin looks like this. Well, these are the settings for the plugin. Within the WordPress admin dashboard of the custom Daily Dev Habit plugin, we have a couple of options for sending our data, our log data, our journal entries. We don't want to keep them in the WordPress database. No need for it. We actually would want to pull this kind of data from as many sites as possible to get, not just a per project view, but a master view of all projects. It requires some work, but I'm getting there. So I started with the GitHub self-hosted because it was the lowest barrier of entry for, well, second lowest. The absolute lowest would be just copying the logs at the end of the question session and then pasting them into a markdown file. If you wanted to store them on GitHub, that would be the next tier. So we'd use the personal access token to connect this web form to the GitHub repo. I wanted to send mine to a database, Postgres, where I could store all of this together out of GitHub, like on my own terms, on, whatever file type I wanted. So that is the basis of the Daily Dev Habit. It started off with a basic form, a prompt, trying to get information from the person running the site, and then over time look at that data and get some ideas of where to improve at the very least. So we looked at the WordPress dashboard. We understand what DDH is, Daily Dev Habit. We went through the origin story, how it started, where it ended up on Notion. The reason I chose Notion was because they were having an MCP server contest, and I put everything I had together to try to enter the contest. I didn't make the deadline, so I did not win. So once that was over, I was like, all right, what else can I do with this? That will come up in V2. Anyway, we want to look at VS Code, the file system and the terminal, the SSH connection, GitHub folder, Linux server, not WSL. So I have used WSL in the past, and I think it's great if you're just getting into working in the terminal. You want to learn Linux, but you only have Windows, then I think it's a good tool to use to start with. But I ended up using an old Windows machine, a Dell Precision, 16 gigs of RAM. It had Windows 10 on it, but Windows 10 support ended not too long ago, so I just removed Windows 10 and added Linux. So now I run Docker on the Dell. This is an HP that I'm on here, and we're using an SSH connection to talk to that Dell. That Dell is running Docker. It's running multiple projects, so we're not dependent on this HP i5 resources for speed or power. The Dell is a little faster. It's got more RAM and a better chip. So that covers SSH. So the GitHub folder is basically the projects folder that I use almost strictly for cloning GitHub repos. I have other files that are not repos. These are just standalone files, but these files are related to VS Code with Copilot. They're more for Copilot or for other agents that I would want to work in this system. So I try to make it simple and keep the process easy for me. Start a new repo, brief description. A lot of mine I start with private unless I know for sure it's going to be public and there's no security or personal information risk. Always add a README. Do a git ignore for WordPress if it's a plugin. Lately I've been doing MIT license just without really thinking about it. And I tend to skip this and just go straight to create repository, and I always do this in the web interface. Once I have it created, then I go to that repository, daily dev habit, and then I copy this, and then I go here and I type git clone and then paste in the repo. Now it becomes part of the project ecosystem running on the Dell. It's the Dell's property, somewhat. I mean, it lives in the cloud, but it's developed on the Dell. And the HP i5 that I'm using to create this video is just a lens into the Dell. So that's why I don't use WSL. The Docker aspect of this is a little more complicated. If you want to see a video about how I use Docker for WordPress plugin development, leave a comment. I will gladly create a 30 to 45 minute video about every aspect of it. I'm pretty sure I have notes on things that I have completely failed on. So I can do the brief overview of how the multi-site and how a single site would work in the local development. So I have that under Project Notes Manager, because the Project Notes Manager is the most complex plugin situation I have going on. So I just made it the master. So inside of this directory, this is one of the very few that's not a project repo on GitHub. It's its own folder, and then it holds project repos from GitHub. This one I don't work in. I work in the other one, but this brings the plugin into the local site. All of these. I think this one, there might be an empty one in here. Anyway, is it this one? Yeah, it's that one, because I don't use that. I use this other one. But the Docker file inside Project Notes Manager is what mounts all of these plugin folders to the WordPress plugin directory. So when I open up local WordPress, it's just already there. Jira Bridge, Trello Bridge, Project Notes Core, Daily Dev Habit, Content Prompter. Okay, not going to go too much more into Docker. It has caused me some problems, but lately I haven't had to troubleshoot too much, so that's been nice. Now we're going to take a look at Railway, specifically DDH Core. This is the online heart of the engineer logs and the WordPress logs, this is where they come to live online. This started out as a local setup. I got it working locally and I was like, all right, it's great. It works the way that I want it to. Now I'm going to shift it to Railway so that it's always on. And this cost me $5 a month or less to keep this. Having this live on Railway makes it much easier to integrate with. So that's pretty much it. If it's stuck on the local machine, you're kind of limited without adding some patches, tunnels, etc. So all of the logs that come from Daily Dev Habit, whether it's the WordPress or the terminal side, they all filter into here. There's only one user, it's me. The journal logs, like I said, are unstructured, so they look a little more wild. Engineering logs are structured, so they're tagged up and ready to be synthesized. And I've got quite a collection. It took me a while to get as many logs as I have. Okay, so that is the Railway side. So this is the same exact thing that is visible in Notion in the Humbler, but I can't let just anybody log into my Railway to see my logs. So Notion is able to read the logs from Railway. There's an integration between Railway and Notion, and that is the DDH Notion bridge. So this job is fairly simple. It's just a server that connects. It listens for a webhook, and it sends engineering logs and journal entries to Notion, so that I don't have to go to Notion and say, can you pull in these engineering logs and journal entries? So that is the Railway part. Gemini Chat Agent in a Browser tab is the next one. This one is pretty simple. I mean, without adding Copilot to the workflow, if you don't have an integrated agent that's able to go into files, make edits, make suggestions, create reports, look at your commit history, then it's a reasonable step to start with the chat agent and ask it for help with creating boilerplate files. Like, I want to make a new WordPress plugin. Can you draft the main plugin file for me? Can you show me what the file structure should look like? Things like that. But after a while, that's going to progress into needing to do things a little faster and not having to bounce back between the browser and the VS Code. Now the chat is in the VS Code. I don't send as much conversational context to Copilot. I try to give it very, very clear instructions with a very simple scope. Nothing too crazy. For Gemini, I would give the broader scope and then use that to break it down into tasks. Okay, well, what would be the first thing that we need to do? So to show what this looks like, because we saw what the Daily Dev Habit terminal looked like, for me, if I'm in here working with Copilot, making edits in files, and I get to some problem, we're just going to say demo test. That's creative. For the project name, demo test. What is the scope of this work? Docs. Short summary, what'd you do? Walkthrough of local environment, Railway, and Notion. Key decision, show Railway backend. Rationale, why? To illustrate, no, to demonstrate. To demonstrate why Notion is somewhat valuable in the system. It actually is somewhat valuable. Friction blockers, rambling, going off script, ruminating, monologuing. Alright, you get the idea. Tags, video transcripts, data sources, and narration. Alright, saved in the Claude database. So what that means is as soon as I hit enter on that, that log went to Railway. The Notion bridge said, I hear you, and then it sent the work to Notion, which we should be able to see here. I think we're at 56. To demonstrate why Notion, you can open this up. To demonstrate why Notion is somewhat valuable in the system. That was, immediate. This is my local development terminal, and Notion is on the internet. So we have Railway in between. Okay, so I guess that somewhat covers the Gemini chat agent in the browser, and also Notion AI, the messy dashboard, and the restart ramps, and why Notion is not the final form or the final form of the front-end face. So Notion is not the final form of the front-end face because I primarily chose it due to a contest I wanted to enter. That contest is come and gone. So now I've reflected, do I want to keep Notion? For now, I am going to keep it somewhat on board, but I've moved to a V2 decision, which I'll be talking about later in this somewhat short video series. So that should set the stage for what we're working with here. If you're maybe like beginning to intermediate level in VS Code in the terminal, the command line, I'm not great with the command line, but I was able to use a chat agent in a browser tab to help me assemble my own command line interface tool. If I can do it, you can do it too. I do not have a computer science degree. So there's probably a few things that I skipped over where, well, didn't skip over, but maybe kind of glazed over and didn't give the proper amount of detail. I might try to edit that in, or I might just keep explaining things until I get it right. So that's going to be the end of part 1. We just covered show me what you're working with, and it's really not that complex. These are very easy access tools. They don't cost a lot of money. I pay $20 a month for Gemini. I pay $10 a month. Yeah, $10 a month for GitHub Copilot. And I pay $5 a month for Railway. I'm not paying for Notion. I don't have too many other costs outside of that. There's web hosting, which I pay yearly. I have one relatively expensive WordPress theme and one relatively expensive plugin that I don't mind paying for. But outside of that, I try to never pay for anything and build my own tools. And I feel like in this age of AI, it's a great time to build my own tools, learn some things. So part 1, show me what you're working with, has come to a close. Next will be part 2, client onboarding. I have a handful of sites that I want to go through the process in a video detailing how to set it up so that this site can start reporting to the system. But I want to do that for V2, so I might have to put something in between part 1 and part 2. I might have to do like a part 1.5. The V2 upgrade. So V1 used a combination of local storage, and then I sent it to the cloud because I was lazy and I didn't have a good booting process for my local setup. I didn't have a good routine, so I outsourced to the cloud. V2, growing up a little bit, being more responsible, being more accountable. So we'll get into part 1.5, the V2 upgrade, local only data storage next, and then client onboarding, how to connect these sites to the system to start getting some data pumping. And then 3, agent onboarding. How do we teach the bot how to do all the stuff we humans just did in this setup? How to log, how to help, edit files. Here's a process. Okay, I'm gonna shut this thing down and start thinking about part 1.5. See you there.